Well, it's finally Friday at last, and we're going to finish up today with grazing planning, and then we can get on with our weekend. So I'm glad you've joined me. A reminder that this is a discussion page, and if anything that we have covered you'd like to discuss, just put it on the page, and either I or some other person will come back to you with recommendations or answers to your questions. So let's get started. As we discussed earlier, one of the first grazing steps you should take is stepping out into each pasture that you've outlined on your map. You should analyze the grass that's there and come back with an estimate of pasture inventory for each pasture. Once you have your pasture inventory, fill it in on the left-hand side of the grazing chart. This should be your animal days per acre. You use this to compare the relative quality of your pastures. Then, multiply by acreage each pasture to estimate the total animal days in each pasture. If you don't know the acres, use Google Earth or an application like Pasture Map to draw out and get your acreage. 1 animal day per acre, or ADA, represents the amount of forage one animal consumes in one day. You may never have thought in terms of animal days before. See if you can calculate the total animal days of grazing that were taken from the land you managed last year. This would be the number of animals times the number of days of grazing. Calculating animal days per acre is a way of estimating forage needed per paddock given stocking rate, or later recording the pounds of forage that has been eaten. A simple way to estimate is by using the standard given forage needed for a 1,000-pound cow, which is about 30 pounds per day. That is considered one animal unit. A cow and a calf is 1.5 animal units. A weaned calf is 0.75 animal units, and a bull is considered 2 animal units. On your chart, mark off such things as calving season and which pastures you want to calve in. Mark off any days that are off-ranch days or special events where you have to go to a wedding or maybe a field day with visitors. And mark off seasonal periods to keep cows out of certain pastures. That could be due to toxic flowering plants like larkspur, or wildlife habitat when you've got animals moving through or birds nesting, and also mark breeding dates and what pastures you intend to breed in. For each month that you plan to stock a certain animal units, calculate how many days of grazing they will need. For example, if you have 100 head of 800-pound steers, you will have 100 times 0.8 animal units, or 80 animal days of forage demand. Match your herd's feed demand with your available forage and animal days in each pasture to calculate how many days your cattle can graze in each pasture. A strong cup of coffee and a calculator will hopefully make this short work. Now it's time to plan out the grazing periods. Make sure to plan around your key dates. You may need to plan or replan the grazing plan throughout pastures several times. Your grazing chart is a living document. Laminating a big chart, hanging it on the wall, and using a dry erase pen is a useful way of doing grazing planning with your team. Make sure to think about how your cattle will flow from one pasture to the next around your ranch. It's helpful to have a map pulled up with gates and water infrastructure. Make sure you have pastures with adequately recovered forage ahead of you. Do not graze yourself into a corner. As you graze each pasture, update your actual grazing periods against your planned grazing periods. How accurate were you at estimating pasture inventory? Do you need to update your pasture inventory for the rest of the pastures? Calculate how many animal days of forage you're grazing from each pasture. Are you taking more or less forage than you intended? Look ahead to see if you're going through your pastures faster or slower than planned. Are you getting adequate recovery on each of your pastures? Do you need to replan? Do you need to change your stocking rate? Finally, here are some things to consider. Are you in an area that has warm season grasses or cool season grasses? Note that your warm season grasses mature to their maximum height during July, and that your cool season grasses actually maximize their height and growth during springtime, but seem to wither in the heat of summer, and then start to grow again come fall. This will have an impact on your grazing pattern and grazing time. And as a rule of thumb, don't let your cattle eat the grass down below 4 inches. Shorter grass takes longer time to rejuvenate than longer grass. As Joel Salatin says, keep your grass in the juvenile phase. Now get out and check those pastures.